Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I am going to be discussing books that I bought in October of 2022. So the reason I'm going back to then, because that is around when I started tracking my book purchases. And it was actually quite a bit, I think, before I actually started filming on YouTube, because I think I started my channel in 2023. I don't know. That doesn't matter for the purposes of this video. Anyway, what you do need to know and want to know maybe is about the books that I purchased then. I know this is a very popular sort of video on BookTube, but the reason I want to do it is because I actually want to start keeping better track of how long books have been on my bookshelves, as well as making sure I'm getting to them and not just happening to overlook them because I don't realize that they've been there for a while. So, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to step a little bit to the side and I'll just scroll through for you the books that I did read in October 2022, as well as the books that I DNF'd in October 2022, because I always think that's interesting. Like, I know we take time to go back and look at what we haven't read, but it's sometimes fun to look back at what we did read. One of the things that I noticed at first glance was that there was a lot of sci fi on that list, and I enjoyed the vast majority of it. That should have been a sign because I feel like I've kind of come full circle with science fiction. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that that's all that's that's all done because I only had, I think, 12 books that I read that month, which is actually on the higher side for me. I typically average somewhere around like 6 to 8, just depending on how long the books are. Because this time period was definitely before I started my channel, at least in terms of recording what I was purchasing and reading and that kind of thing, I do not have a video showing my actually hauling these books, but I am going to talk to you about all of them. So, surprisingly for me, I only hauled 5 books in the month of October, and I'll share with you the stats regarding those real quickly, and then we're going to talk about the books one by one. Of those 5 books, I read 2 of them. I still own 2 that are unread. I unhauled one that was unread, and I didn't DNF any books that month. At least not of the books that I hauled that month, because I've already shown you what books I did haul in October, but all of those were books that were purchased at a different time. Let's go and talk about the books one by one. For that, I'm going to need my handy dandy notebook. Okay, I have my Fox notebook of all random things, and let's go over the information that I found here. So, for starters, the book that I unhauled was Katherine by Anya Seton. And this is a book that I've heard a lot of really good things about, but at the time that I hauled it, I wasn't aware that I wasn't a huge fan of historical fiction. I do read quite a bit of it, but it can be really hit or miss for me, and I still haven't quite figured out what like subgenre of historical fiction I like. I thought this book had a beautiful cover that also attracted me to it. I had seen it mentioned a lot on BookTube, and it was a nice chunky book. So all of that appealed to me, and I'm sure played in my decision to buy it. I did attempt reading this book a couple of times, but one of the things that I was not aware about this book is that I don't remember what time period it's set in, but the book is also written in the dialect of that time. So if you've read Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, for example, which is a book that I recently read, that book is also written in the dialect of that time and first person voice and very much feels like that time period. This book, if I recall correctly, is not written in the first person. However, everybody speaks the appropriate older form of English. And it's not that I couldn't understand it. It's just that wasn't the type of read I was looking for in picking up that book. Now, I do want to add that at the time, I did not listen to audiobooks, and I do think that's something that would help with this book. But just knowing that I don't have a huge interest in historical fiction, the likelihood of my ever repurchasing that book is really low, because it's really unlikely that I would want to get around to it anytime soon. Even the plot and the premise of the book itself is not one I'm really gripped by. I think I really just got bought into all the hype that there is surrounding this book. And I'm sure it's well worth it, but it's just not that big a deal for me. As I mentioned, that is the one book of the 5 that I hauled in October 2022 that at some point over the course of the years, I have unhauled. It may even be a book that I unhauled before moving. Okay, there were two books that I hauled in October 2022 that I have since then read. And surprisingly, I don't own either of these books. And the reason I'm surprised by that is because I actually really enjoyed one of the books, and one of them I know I owned. So now I'm kind of wondering what I did with it. But we'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk about the first book. The first book, according to my notebook, is The Spirit War, and that is by Rachel Aaron. I actually didn't haul this book now that I'm thinking about that. Why is it in this video? Oh, well, we're just gonna go with it. It was listed in my library as hauled. I don't own it because I never actually hauled it. That just confuses everything, and I don't know why I only just realized that now. And I need to, like, actually physically haul it at some point. So, wow, totally throwing off my numbers, but let's just keep going. Okay, so the opposite of the previous book is the next book, which is Lonely Castle in the Mirror. This is by Mizuki Tsujimura, and I read this on February 5th through 8th, also in 2023, so about a month later than the last book, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And the reason I said that this book is the opposite of the last one is because the last book I never owned and said I hauled, and this book I'm saying I own but think I unhauled. I need to work on my stats here, clearly. I don't actually know what's going on. Now, in truth, I don't actually know what's going on because I'm pretty sure I should still own this book. But again, this may have been a book that I unhauled when I moved, and I may have just not updated my journal to reflect that. If I unhauled it, I would have unhauled it to a little free library because I did some very pretty highlighted annotations, and that's something where I feel like only a particular person would want to purchase or not purchase, would want that book. And I didn't want to sell it to anyone, but I think I also didn't want to move it with me. Either that or it's hidden somewhere behind my other books. I just thought it was such a good like young adult novel to read in like late middle school, early high school. It really talks about how isolating it can feel in a school setting, as well as like how traumatic certain sort of peer gestures can be and how they can really be seen as very damaging and traumatic, and how different students at that age can really struggle with trauma for a variety of different reasons. It's a really, really fascinating setup for a book. It's one where you do kind of have to wait till the end of the book to understand the sort of magical realism going on. But I think the discussions and topics in it, while heavy, are really important. And I think that's why I would have left it in a little free library because it wasn't a book that I saw myself ever rereading, but it was a book that I felt like needed to be shared. I do have on my channel a review of that book somewhere, or at least I know I mention it. So, again, if I can find that video, I will link it in the description box below if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on that book. I will warn you that for both of these books that I've read, if it's a review, it's very early on in my channel. I don't even think I had the camera I currently have. I definitely didn't have the microphone that I'm using, which, whether that's a gain or not, no pun intended. Anyway, yeah, so just be warned. Their earlier videos, very different quality. So the two unread books I have are Lady Audley's Secret and the Karamazov brothers. And I will talk about each of these and why I hauled them and potentially why I haven't read them yet. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is the Karamazov brothers. I want to read Dostoevsky. I, in general, like Russian literature, and I have, other than the Notes from the Underground, which I read, I think, in late middle school. I have not read any other Dostoevsky, and I remember nothing about that work. So I definitely want to give him a try. The Karamazov brothers is one that I have heard a lot about. And so I don't think it's going to be the first one I read, but I definitely want to read it. I specifically bought this edition, which is put out by Oxford World Classics and translated by Ignat Avesy, because I liked the fact that he wrote the title the way it should actually be written in English. The actual translation, if you constructed it correctly and not just literally, would be the Karamazov brothers. And so I thought it would be interesting to read a translation where somebody wasn't going for a literal translation, but wasn't necessarily trying to interpret everything, but was like just kind of trying to be a bit more nuanced. And this really appealed to me. For a lot of books that I read in translation, I check the website We Love Translations. I'll put that into the description box as well because they do a really good job of just making it very easy to compare multiple translations of the same book, typically classics. And they give you the same page in the book to look at so you can compare yourself and find a translation that you feel like will be very easy for you to read and understand or accomplish whatever goal you might have. They give the pros and cons to each translation. I feel like they're pretty fair, and they typically list every single translation of a book that you could possibly want, as well as where you can purchase it and what your cover will probably look like. So it's super helpful, and that's how I came to this book. Now, why haven't I read it? I think I'm honestly just intimidated by Dostoevsky. I know I like Tolstoy, and I also know that a lot of people who like Tolstoy don't like Dostoevsky and vice versa. So I'm hesitant. I know it's a very different approach to writing a book. And I mean, they're different authors, of course it is. So I don't know. I have figured out over the course of the years since buying this that I do like philosophical fiction. I do know that that tends to be something that is very prevalent in Russian writing, just in terms of philosophy itself. And I believe Dostoevsky gets a bit heavier on that side. So I should, in theory, enjoy his writing. I'm just not sure if this is the one that I want to start with. The other unread book that I have is Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. I actually don't know why I haven't picked this up yet. I think I just keep skirting around it. I also pick my books to read randomly, and I don't think the letter L comes up that often in the TBR game I play. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I think it also just gets like tucked back in there. Maybe I forget about it if I'm not thinking about it in the moment, or don't feel like reading a sensation novel, which is more or less so what this is, which is like a very dramatic and traumatizing family story in some ways, or like a domestic thriller. I think that's probably the closest equivalent. That is a genre that I really like, not domestic thriller, sensation genre. And so I do want to read this. I just need to remember that it's on my shelf and that I've owned it for a while and that it's just quietly sitting there waiting for me to pick it up. So I think what I will do with both these books is either face them outwards on the shelves that they're on, or put them like to the far side, like to the far left, since that's where I tend to start looking, or something. I need to do something. I am actually doing something. What am I saying? One of the things that I've decided to do as I go forward with this is I have a little book that I've started keeping track of my monthly TBRs in. And both of these books, in fact, all five books that I hauled in October are going to be on that list. And that is going to be the way that I'm going to start keeping track of like what I've read and haven't read. I think that will potentially help me. We'll see. So that's it for today. Starting this month, I plan on going forward and like regularly updating on revisits. I was going to just do it all at once, but that's way too many books at some points. So I'm going to start with the year 2022, and each month I will talk about the books that I hauled in that month, but in 2022. So for October, I did October. Next month in November, you will hopefully see another video like this where I will be talking about the books that I hauled in November of 2022. However many books that is. It is probably more. I know my largest months tend to be December and July because that's Christmas and my birthday, respectively. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know if you keep track of what you've hauled and when you haul it, and I'll talk to you next time.